Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly Jacobs.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Kimberly Jacobs. This is my 34th year and hardest year ever teaching. I know I'm not alone in that feeling. I started out teaching high school economics and wanted to go back to my hometown. So I moved to middle school and did general ed for 15 years before I made the switch over to special education. So I have general ed experience. Currently, I'm a resource teacher at a middle grades at a K-8 school. But just prior to this, and when I found Boom, this is kind of what saved me, is I was a resource specialist. So some states call that an interventionist because I'm in California. So resource teacher for a K-12 charter school. So I had to have resources like across the board, and it was getting super expensive to buy workbooks and run copies for, one kid at this grade and one student at this grade. And I found that with Boom, I could make a deck and it didn't cost as much money because the subscription's reasonable and I could track their data. So then I started the idea of tweaking, if I matched that deck to exactly what the trials were going to be for the IEP, then they could come in while I was helping, a senior get his project together. My 8th grader could do the Boom deck while I'm just kind of paying attention, and I would get the data that I needed to track for progress monitoring. So that's kind of how I became addicted, and honestly, now I'm quite dependent on Boom cards to run my program in a meaningful way. So I'm going to start sharing my screen because I did get ready for today. As she can tell you, I kind of got ready more at the last minute, maybe than some teachers, but here we go. Okay, so she already covered what we're gonna do today. I'm Kimberly Jacobs. I'm in Tracy, California, so I'm kind of Central California. You can tell by my hair, it's windy. It's always windy here. So that's where I am, and I have a store in Boom and TBT that's called Lessons in a Bubble, because that's kind of what I think I do. The kids come over, and in the little bubble of our 20 minutes or 40 minutes, we get things done. So today we're going to talk about, I'm not going to tell you obviously your present levels of your students, but this is my process. I look at their present levels from when they move into my school or when I do a big formal assessment. I compare it to my state standards of where we need them to be. At what part of that standard are we going to make independent, or how we're going to scaffold it. I write the IEP goal, and from the IEP goal, I create the Boom decks for the students, so they'll exactly match. I have Boom decks for applied math, reading, vocabulary, calculation, spelling, language development, grammar, and behavior. So I have Boom decks for pretty much everything I write goals for usually. So we're going to go through my library. So this one, here's a goal. So on all the slides, I have the IEP goal at the top. That was the name of my bonus page. Not one of my students. So we have a goal by September 22nd. Bella will tell time to the half hour on an analog clock with 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials. So I like the button choices. So this slide, obviously we were doing this in March. Her IEP had just been in February, and I have my clocks, so they're kind of a little cuter. They're, I can have the March theme to switch them out if you don't want them to always be seasonal. It really isn't that hard. If I wanted to just take out my leprechaun and make it a basic thing, takes very little time because you can duplicate your deck. Getting the time choices and the clocks set up is what took time when I was making this. And the other part, and it's in the notes on the side, when I'm making especially the button choice decks, I always want to make sure that one of the choices is the typical mistake, because I don't want parents or my administrator to think that Boom is making the learning necessarily easier because the choices were wrong. So if I had 11:30, 2 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, a lot of kids could get 11:30, but that 11:30 to 12:30 is often a mistake they make. So when you're making these, especially on my click button ones, I make sure that the typical mistake or the mistake that student has been making when we're doing I would call it in-person practice because they're not independent on the boom deck. I make sure that that's a choice. So I'm really measuring, do they actually know it, or are they just pretty good guessers? Here's a new goal in a different deck that I made. She will solve grade level word problems with all 4 operations with 80% accuracy, also 4 out of 5 trials. So the end of the wording on my IEP goals is pretty much the same. If you've been to my store, I have goal banks and they all kind of end with that same ending. On this one, it's kind of a typical word problem that, 30 years ago, I would have found in a Scholastic workbook, and I would have run, pages and copies, and they would have lost the paper and it would have got wrinkled. I know they can't show their work on here necessarily, and that is something that I often ask them to do, is to use the paper with the boom deck to show their work. The older kids, I give them the whiteboards. I have a couple kids that writing on the whiteboard, they'll participate in it. So I can't really keep a record of it, but I also have the choice of sitting with them going through the boom deck together. So if they're going to write on a whiteboard, we can still have boom be my question. So I'm not having to buy a workbook. I'm not having to run a copy, but I can still work 2-on-1, 1-on-1. And I've used them whole class. We have a sub shortage right now. And so I took a boom deck into a kindergarten classroom, and we just did it whole class, and they pointed at what they wanted me to move, and I did it. So when you get math problems like this, showing the work, it's up to you how you do that. You can have a worksheet, you can have a paper, you can do a whiteboard. It's really up to you. And the ease of this is, I think the graphics are cuter because I can have color. I can't afford color copies ever. And they're easy to change. They're more engaging for the kids. So how you get them to show the work. And on this one, there's a type in answer. So they'll have to type it in exactly. And if you notice, it says at the top, type your answer below, include the units. So only type the numbers. Oh, I included the units. So I always have to make sure I tell them how to answer with numbers. Do you want decimals? What place value? Do you want the dollar? So when you're first making these up for your class, really decide how you're going to have that answer be, to be consistent. I know a lot of teachers, when they do state testing, want these boom decks to match how the state test is going to ask them online. So if you know more about your state testing, you can match that more exactly. And I'm going to trust, because I know people are watching the comments, if there's something that comes up that's a question specific to a card, just go ahead and interrupt me. So here's another space one for multiplication. This deck in particular, I like because it has the tallies at the bottom. So again, the goal is using the repeated addition to solve her multiplication problem. So I had to create a deck that included the tool for her repeated addition for her to solve this multiplication. So again, on Boom, there's a lot of decks I could have gone and just bought multiplication decks, single digit or 2x1 or 2x2, but I want this, child to make the transition from that repeated addition to the multiplication. So having that tool on that slide was very important to me. This is a great brain-based research activity. If you haven't thought about doing with your students, it works with larger numbers too, showing them the bundles, because kids might get intimidated. Oh, 4 times 9, 9's a big number. I don't know that. But when they see the boxes of tally marks, they're less apprehensive because they're, oh, well, I can count by 5, 5, 10, 15, 20. They write that down and then they count the 1 sticks and then they add it together and they get the right answer every time. So these are kind of my no mistake ones, the ones where they're using the repeated addition to multiply. So that would be an example goal and a deck that would go with that. So you can think out of the box. Don't go into Boom looking to buy what you need to match your goal necessarily, because if it's not there, you can make it. They're easy to make. Just do it. It'll be fine. I make them in PowerPoint, put them as backgrounds, but you can match your goal directly to your task. This one says 2-step real world problems. So again, it's nothing more than what would have been a worksheet in 1990, but I've put it on Boom. I've written ones that kind of go with clip art. This one I found the tree clip art. I was like, oh, I'm going to do a deck for that because I had a student who didn't didn't have any idea about her measurements. She didn't know how many inches in a foot, didn't know what was longer, a foot or yard. So I did a whole deck just on measurement using the treehouse thing. And again, I have the yards typed in, so all they have to do is type the number. And I have the arrow down here. So if you notice on the bottom right corner, there's a little speaker. That's the PowerPoint speaker. In the deck, there's a music icon, because Boom allows you now to do voice. It's not like a PowerPoint where the voice will come on right when the student clicks on the slide, but there's an icon they can click on it and have it read to them. So I'll show you a couple other decks coming up that are spelling decks that I had gone back and added sound. So if you have non-readers or students that they would look at this passage and think, oh, that's too long, I'm not even reading it, even though we're trying to work on math, you can add your voice over it so it's accessible for your non-readers to do these multi-step math problems. And it's a very patient program. It will read that little sentence or that math problem as many times as they need to click it. That's another thing that's really nice about Boom, is it's a patient program. Here's the goal: solve one-step variable equations with 80% accuracy. So using the number line for these integer problems, this was 6th grade last year's, I think, who I wrote it for. And like a lot of kids, just having those positive, negative integers doesn't mean anything to them. They need to be, just my students with IEPs, need to be attached to that number line a little bit longer of what it looks like. And so to kind of change it up and make it a little more challenging for my students, I turned the number line vertically. So I wrote the problems for above ground and below ground, because they were getting pretty comfortable with their sticker number line that's on their desk and using that. But I wanted to kind of just switch it up, because we need to be able to, adapt to other situations. And I'm guessing there's a state question where the number line's vertical, or at least the situation's vertical. So Boom allows you to have images that are engaging, images that are clear, that still include the tool your kids need to get the right answer if they're transitioning to that independence, that stage of mental math. So this benchmark, it's on there twice. She will correctly interpret, I have to move your faces, real world statements into mathematical terms. So this was one. I was going to show you how I have teaching slides. Boom has the ability to randomize all the cards. So every time the kids play it, it's completely different. If you start your group on it together or neighbors on it together, they'll get different questions. So they're not always like just copying their friend. So that's fabulous. The other thing Boom will allow you to do is have the decks play in order. So if you want the problems done in a specific order, you can play them in an order. Or like I have on this deck, I have 2 direction slides. So after the first 2 direction slides, the rest of it is random. So some of my decks have a teaching or review slide because it's in the IEP, and it's not in this goal, but in the IEP, that before assessing, students will participate in a remembering activity. That's what I call it. So basically just a review of, we know you know this, remember you know this, oh yeah, I know that, okay. And then we release them to do the task, to collect our data to see how independent they are. I know I was using remembering techniques with fractions all the way through college statistics, because I couldn't remember adding fractions and multiplying. So I'd memorized a couple math problems, so I would have to do my remembering activity. So I allow that in there. There's another feature that Boom's added more recently since I started using them, that's a flow deck. And it's kind of like the freeway. They'll all start here, and then you can branch off and have some of your students go off this direction down a path of slides. Another group can go down this direction down a path of slides. When you build them, it's linear, so you kind of have to map it out ahead of time. But it is a fabulous feature. I only have one deck that uses it because it kind of gave me a headache, and I was like, I'm just going to do the in order ones. So that's me, but it's available to you. And remember, you can put teaching slides at the beginning or direction slides at the beginning and have them appear for all students every time. And then it goes into the random feature. This one, Bella would be able to use information on a chart or graph to solve real world problems. So again, this came out of the 7th grade classroom. He was doing a review at the beginning of this year, and my 7th graders just bombed it. I'm thinking it's distance learning. They weren't engaged as much last year as they could have been. So there's a lot of gaps that my kids haven't had problems with before. Reading a chart's not been a big issue in my career for the kids, my little friends, but this year nobody was reading a chart. So I made a whole deck of reading charts, and those make them 2-step word problems. So we have one of the kids has a goal. That IEP happened back in August because she just moved to my school. I'd already seen this as a problem, so I added in a goal. So I have my word problem, I have the chart, and then on this one, it says type your answer here. Again, that's kind of your personal choice when you know your students. Do you need to tell them where to answer? Having the box with the blinking light might be enough for your older kids. And that's another part about Boom that's amazing. I can have 3rd graders and 8th graders that are working on the same skill. And once I build the meat of that deck, I can customize how that background looks. I think I have some of my I would be considered one of my more mature backgrounds. So for the middle school kids, because it doesn't look like baby, if that makes sense to you. And some of them look very elementary, some of them look more middle school. But once you get the backgrounds, very. So spelling, I have a couple examples of spelling. This one is spelling grade level words with long vowel sounds. Now I know one of the criticisms of this is going to be if the student's choosing the correct spelling, they're not actually spelling it. I agree. Myself being dyslexic, I know that when I see a word, I needed to know what it looked like, because my problem is auditory, but I don't really hear the vowels, so I can't depend on sounding it out. Until I was older, I couldn't remember just the memory of it all, but I could remember how they looked because I was always a good reader. It was the phonics that output the spelling part. So my mom had me practice this way back in the 70s. So I made it into decks for my kids. And the good news or questionable news from California is the spelling, when they grade it for the state test, it's the same thing. It's recognizing the correct spelled word. And if you think about the students applying that to their writing, if they spell it and it doesn't look right, it's a signal for them they need to check it. If they spell it because they've built some more visual memory by doing these activities, it does transfer over. Is it the same thing? Not at all. Do for your students what is best for them. This has helped a lot of students, and it's a certain kind of dyslexia that where we need to build the visual memory to make up for the auditory processing issues. So that doesn't work for every student. You know your kids, but this is an option. And then again, I'll show you how the older kid, she has 4 choices where the younger student only has 2 choices of spellings. So again, you can customize these to your age of the student, the need of the student. This one is an example of customizing toward the interest of the child. When I started in special ed, we would read a lot, provide high interest this, high interest that. And it gets expensive trying to buy, high interest items for 28 to 100 different kids, depending on your teaching environment. But Boom Deck, the clip art that I buy or create, it's much cheaper and it can be used in multiple times. So I had a boy whose dad was in the military, he was gone. And so he would do anything military. If we turned it into a military something, he would do it because I think emotionally made him feel close to his dad. So I bought some camo clip art and we put in his vocabulary words. And he did that and he did really well. And he didn't get bored of it. So we did this for months and months. So it wasn't even for his IEP progression goal. It was just his weekly practice activity for vocabulary. And I just changed the words out every week and we kept the same background. I think I changed the airplane once in a while, but you can do that just, as their independent practice instead of having to copy definitions out of a dictionary, something like that. They need to know what the word means. They need to be able to read the word. You could add a voiceover where you're reading the 3 words because you could have a voice at each word. If you wanted it read to them, this student, he didn't need that. So I did not do that. Here's a vocabulary builder deck. We do activities where they're called gradients, and just a teaching bird walk where you would have something in the middle. Let me think of a word. So talk. So somebody talks. Well, what if they're talking really loudly? And we would think of other words that would mean talking really loudly, like they would yell, they would shout, they would scream, and we put them on a gradient to which is the loudest. In the other direction, we would go to quiet. So they would whisper, they would mumble, and we would build these gradients. And it was a vocabulary building activity. And the general ed teacher I was working with, we found out the kids didn't have a lot of words and they weren't sure what they meant. So if I said that the student was pontificating, because we had things, they didn't know what it meant. So like, oh, you know what, let's make some boom decks for the end of the day time, that little sponge time at your end of the day. So we just came up with different words. We had a category of talking and noise and walking and moving. And so this is drag and drop. I would take shout. Is that a talking or noise word, or is that a walking and moving word? And so they just drag and drop, sort them into categories. The speech teacher, she saw this, she liked it. We made a couple of different decks for her that had category sorts. We have like tools versus animals. We have animals that live in the ocean, animals that live on the land. But again, she got super excited when she saw what we were doing with the boom deck and has asked me to make some speech and language decks to meet her students' IEP goals so that they can have independent practice. This year, the parents are very excited to have them at home as well, because then there's less speech therapy time that has to happen in class. If we can control the activity in the deck that they're doing and the parents are willing to do it at home, that lets the students stay in class longer. And with most of my clients being middle school kids right now, we don't want to pull them out any more than we have to. There's that balance between how much support do they need to fill those back gaps and how much do they need to be in the class because their thinking's on point. They're just having performance issues or input issues that we're having to accommodate. So having a boom deck that you created with your word list that's getting practiced at home, that's time they don't have to be out of class, but they're getting the support that they need. Here's another one we did, again, vocabulary development. This one was not actually for IEP goal originally. It was for an ELD goal. So one of the students has an IEP, but we needed a language goal. And again, knowing adjectives was really important. So if I'm having a hard hat, is it hard or is it pokey? What would you call it? So there's a bunch of nouns and then there's just two adjectives. Which adjective best describes that item in the picture? So it's just adjective work. Helps with the ELD students. When you're working one-on-one or small group, you can talk about what's the item because they might not even know that's called a hard hat. But we'll talk about the item, then we'll pick the right word. The kids can even log in on their own devices if you're one-on-one. So I can have my device, I set the deck to go in order, so not random, go through them together and they can get their own scores. So I can show or project the screen, we can talk about it, and then everybody votes or takes the test on their own. So they're clicking on their own. I've set the deck in order, so we're going in order. So my slide matches their slide unless they work ahead, and there's always that friend that wants to work ahead. And clicking them from random to in order, very easy. So you can have it random during independent practice, but if you want that deck as a whole class instructional tool or a small group practice and you want to go in order to guide them more, just go into Boom Deck. You just click the little box from randomized to unclick it so it's not randomized, and then it's set to in order. Your class is over, they're going to go home and practice. You just click the button to randomize again. So very easy to adapt and change on the fly in the minute to get what you need for your students. This goal is her verb tenses. The grammar ones are a little harder to write, I must admit. It's probably my run-on sentence situation with my own personal life. But we have tell, teach, and taught, and the students have to fill in what would go in the blank. This is one of the skills that's on Woodcock Johnson, is filling in the blank. But we also know the verb tenses is an EL goal for students. It's also, a grammar goal. It can be a speech goal. And I chose on this one to have the kids type in the answer. 2 reasons: my students with dyslexia that were working on the spelling, having them spell it correctly and not guess is important. That's one of the struggles that comes with getting students to maybe spell correctly automatically, is they've spelled it wrong for so long, they don't remember the way that's right. They're like, oh, I know I spelled it this way and this way, but which way is right? So until we can build more visual memory to check it, they're kind of in a quandary, even when they're trying their best. So by having the words to choose from, they don't have to guess how to spell it, but they get to practice spelling it. And if your kids are like mine, a lot of them are finger hunt and peck. They'll just they'll find the T, E. So they're saying it, they're thinking about it, they're moving, they're typing it. So it's great practice for a lot of skills, not just that grammar piece. This one says Bella will sort words into categories. So here's the category sorts I told you about. We have animals, we have food and tools, and then find the fruit. So this one was just identify. This one, no, it's not there. On some of them, I even say from a field of 3. Some of them don't say how many choices there will be. Like this one was a whole sort. We did this with the kindergarten class when I had to sub at the last minute. They had a great time. We learned what some of these tools were called. It was fabulous fun. And that was like a carnival theme. These pictures, I bought the clip art that was the animals, but these backgrounds I got off pexels.com, P-E-X. And I just typed in water. And so that's just a water background that I got for free. Again, more clip art that I bought, but that's just because I'm committed. I know I'm going to be using Boom Decks forever, and they're cheaper than those plastic workbooks ever were, and I don't have to copy them. So that's an example of that. Oh, this is the behavior one. So Bella will complete items of an unpreferred task. I think it says 5. It's hidden by the Zoom thing, before doing a preferred task. So these are my token boards. My daughter is a speech therapist, and she uses token boards. A lot of her friends are struggling with autism, and they need high interest rewards often. She has some kids where if they know this is the token board they're going to get to play, they'll be able to perform the task 10 times or comply 10 times to get to play free time on the board altogether. Some of them need 1 question, move 1 item, 1 question. Your students, you can use it however you want, but here's just 2 different examples of token boards. On this one, you drag the heart into one of the hearts that you want. You can read it. The animal one, if you wanted to just use it as engaging activity. When I started teaching, my really good friend, Julia, my speech teacher friend, she had boxes and tubs of everything. And she would haul tubs in and out of the storage across the hall to have things to talk about with the students, because engaging in conversation is always working on taking turns in a conversation. But, she had to haul it. She had to store it. She had to buy it. She had to clean it up. And that was pre-COVID, when we weren't even getting sick from things that hadn't been touched forever. So Boom Decks are cleaner. You don't have to worry about where you're going to store them. You don't have to explain it to your husband where it came from, because he doesn't even know it's there. So it allows a lot of freedom to do the things good teachers are always been doing, but doing it on a digital platform that makes it, and now with COVID, almost a safer way, definitely a cleaner way, less clutter, and then you can hoard something else like a craft supply as you have room. This one was written for my daughter. She had a girl with a speech goal to correctly use in front of, behind, over, under, in between. And she liked puppies and kittens, so they're sprinkled throughout the deck. Put the ball between the puppy and the tree. So I'm going to take the ball, and if I put it between, it's going to light up and be correct. If she puts it in front, it's not going to work. So we have different decks for the different prepositions. This deck did not do all of them. It had in front of and in between were the only 2 choices. This one does not have speech on it, because when Mariah is working with her students, she is working with them in person and she is doing one-on-one. She's just using this as the tool to give them something to do to measure it. So again, back in the 90s, we would have had, Tigger was who I used. Tigger's on the desk, he's under the desk, he's in the desk. So I had a stuffed animal Tigger. So she's just using the digital platform to do the same things that we do. This was a fun one. Mariah, that's my daughter, I had asked for, and again, it was conversation. She needed the kids to have conversations. It was a group of kids, so they had a variety of interests, and one of the little girls was painfully shy, like did not want to participate in any kind of group conversation. So we needed a way to get her to start participating with a low threshold of investment, like she wasn't going to be wrong. Maybe she wasn't going to be the only one saying it. So we have this activity and it's called Move the Tent. And so Mariah would go to a slide and the group together would say, move that tent. And then she'd move the tent, and behind the tent, and I can't show you, I'm sorry, because we're in a PowerPoint, behind the tent is a child doing an activity. So I had bought clip art that was I think it was verbs. So some of the kids are skateboarding, some are sitting, some are eating. So there's just kids doing things behind the tent. And the tent's just draggable. There's nothing else to the slide. I think that one has like 60 different things hidden behind the tent. So they moved the tent and the girls started participating because it was predictable. She wasn't doing it alone. She started to engage with the kids. Once we move the tent, we just have a conversation. What's the kid doing? She can work on tenses, labeling the activity. She can ask, what is he wearing? Where do you think he's at? Does that picture belong in this forest? Because some of them are pictures that would be interior. And so she could just, use the pictures. Again, I'm going to say it again, like good teachers have been doing forever. It's just on a digital platform. So this was one of her favorites. She uses a lot, uses it with group, especially if there's a shy student. This one is the SH sound I also made for Mariah. It has CH and SH sorting. Again, Julia, back in the 90s, she had a box of stuff and they'd pull it out and they would sort. Okay, these are cherries. This is shiny, and they would sort it. So now instead of having to have a box of things, we have a boom deck, we have images. Teacher can name them ahead of time. If you think your students don't know what word would go with it, then listen for your target sounds. This goal, she needed the sounds in all three positions. They aren't all three positions on every slide, but when you go through the whole deck, you can get a measurement. So speaking of measurements, here's a report that you're going to get after students participate. You're going to go into your class, you're going to click on your student, and you're going to look at reports. That's how I look at them because they're individual. You could get reports through another pathway, and boom, I always go to the student first. I go to their last activity they did, and then I click on the report. And so I get these things on my little meters. How many times did they play it? So if it was homework for my middle school students, did they do it that often? If I have a sub for a couple days and I told them they had to play it while the sub was gone, did they play it twice? So how many times they played? They'll tell me how many questions they've mastered. So out of that deck of 15, this student mastered 14. How long did they spend on the deck? So this says 1:47. That's measurement again, middle squirrely. We had done a social studies quiz during distance learning on a boom deck. So I was like, let me try it. Let's just try a quiz online with boom deck. And it was, I think 20 social studies questions. Half of them were button, half of them were answer. And the student, it wasn't one of my IEP students that was in the class I was supporting. It was one of the general ed kids, and she'd clicked through the deck in 4 per second. And then she failed the test. And then wanted us to reassign it because she needed to study more. And so I showed her the report and said, well, had I thought she tried and needed to study more, I'd be fine with that. But it's going to take me longer. It wasn't not longer by much. It's going to take me longer to reassign that to her to take it again than she spent trying. So this is great for parents. Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. They're not doing well. Well, they didn't spend any time doing it. So it's great data for those hard conversations for middle school kids. And because I support a lot of co-teaching kind of situations, these are also available to my general ed kids when they're state standard. So I have some of those conversations. But it tells you 80% average. So if I know we've played it 2.3 times and an 80% average, I know if my goal says 4 out of 5 times, they need to play it some more. I need to finish. I need at least 5 plays on this deck to use that average score. If my goal says 2 out of 3, then I can just use the last score. So they've done 2 out of 3, so I just need them to finish one more time. But I'm looking now and saying, ooh, well, the last time they played, it was only 66% accuracy. So I'm not ready to measure that goal without some intervention, some reteaching, because it's still my job to teach kids. I don't leave the boom decks to always do the teaching. It's the independent practice. Can you put a teaching or review slide at the beginning? Absolutely. It's my job to teach. So if I see that they're not making that IEP goal, and maybe the benchmark was to be at 60%, then I'd be like, okay, the student's on track to meet the benchmark. And I just let them keep practicing on their own. If the goal was to be 80 and it's 4 weeks until their IEP, I know I need to get in with that skill and do another activity to build more understanding before I send them back to that boom deck. Or maybe that boom deck's not working for that student and I'm going to measure it a different way. Because you always, have that freedom. But the independent practice opportunities are wonderful. Getting this feedback on this little dashboard of reports is invaluable. I don't know if you guys are aware, boom prices go up. So if you can buy years ahead, do it. I'm planning on retiring in about 6 years, and I'm not going to be without boom for the rest of my career. It's just been a game changer to know that the kids can be on activities. I don't have to clean them up. They're not germs. I don't have to wipe them down. I don't have to store them, and I can make them. I have more control over these boom decks, making them match what my students need than I had even for my centers. We had the big manila envelopes where you laminated things and you cut them out and you put them in, and there was a worksheet that went with it, and they were great. And I still have a whole tub of them in my room I pull out sometimes. But, this is just the new version of that. And it's cheaper. I don't have to laminate it. The time I spent laminating and cutting, I can make a boom deck and all my kids could play it at the same time. And I'm not going to lose a piece. And then, oh my gosh, we don't have the B with the EA on it anymore. What are we going to do? And then you try to color one and make it work. It doesn't happen. The parts don't get lost. You can change it up as much as you want. You can copy the decks. You can clone the whole deck and just change the background. And now they don't even know they're playing the same game if you didn't want them to, because you can assign it by student or by class. So I kind of talked about that bottom already. So using the clone feature, so that's the other thing, kind of talked about that. You don't have to laminate it. Boom decks are the same thing as old centers were, but better. So I'm going to go ahead and close the presentation. I'm not going to, do I stop sharing, Connie? I know we went over, it's like 3:45, so we might not have a lot of time.
Yeah.
I am going to stop sharing. So if somebody has questions, did you get some in the chat? I should maybe answer for sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions actually.
Okay.
So we have one that says, how long to usually make on deck? How long do you take to make a deck? Is it a lot of preparation?
Okay, it depends on the deck. So the spelling deck where it just had 2 choices, I had my word list ready to go. I could make that deck in 20 minutes. Like by the time I upload it, move my, I'm going to drag my little box where I type in my word, then I'm going to copy that, delete it, type it in. I could do that in 20 minutes. So I could do it in less than a prep period. The other one, like the telling time, that first clock one, that took a long time because the clip art I bought had a clock for every single minute. So I had to open a folder and then, open the 1 o'clock folder and then find the time I wanted to use. So it really, really depends on the deck, how detailed it is. Trying to think that, like the treehouse word problem one, the thinking up the word problem took way longer than putting that background and that clip art on there. So after I had the word problems decided on, again, it took like 15 minutes to make the whole deck. And I didn't talk about it at all, but how long should decks be? Might be a question that's coming up. It depends on the task and it depends on the student. So when I'm thinking about that, I don't want it to be so many, on some of my kids, I don't want it to be so many cards that they don't finish because they have completion issues they want to get done. If it's something that is going to be the measurement tool for the IEP, and I put, 80% accurate, I will make it a 10 slide deck because the 80% is, accurate. 20 slides would take the student too long to do. Your two-step word problems takes the students longer to do. So you think, okay, it's going to take them 2 minutes per slide. So I want that to be 12 to 15 slides to fill a 30-minute station. When you're just clicking the correct spelling word, those are 30 to 40 words long because they're just reading the word. And once they've gotten used to what the correct word looks like, they'll click through fast. So
Perfect.
sorry, I
Yeah.
answered 2 questions, one you didn't even ask.
No, actually, we have some questions related to that. And
Okay.
yeah, I wanted to also mention that when you create your decks, you have the power to do that, to personalize learning. And, you can create as many cards as you want. And also you can like divide topics into different decks. And you can also custom play like the settings and of the deck, and you can hide some cards. If you have a deck of 20 cards, you can hide some cards and then reassign into them with the rest of the cards that you hide.
Right. So the hiding works really well if you're having students practice something. So, the subs coming in, you want them to practice for 30 minutes. So all 50 are there. So they're not going to run out. There's no way they get done and say, I'm done. But when you go to do a progress monitoring, you just hide a whole bunch of them, get them down to the 10. So you can progress monitor with an easy number. Okay. They randomly got 10 and they got 8 out of 10 right. So there's my progress monitoring.
Perfect. So we have one related to that, and is how many slides do you put in a deck if they're playing the same deck repeatedly? So
some of the kids enjoy playing the same deck repeatedly because they like being successful. They usually have a chance to play every deck 3 or 4 times before I take it away. But again, it depends. So the question was, how many slides and do they play repeatedly? Now, and the repeatedly depends. I have some word problem decks that I wrote for 7th grade, and they're not going to get through all of the slides, in 2 weeks. So to the kids, it feels like they're repeatedly playing it because every Tuesday from 2 to 2:15, they play the math fraction word problem deck. So to them, it seems like they're playing it repeatedly, but they're getting different questions every time. So I have one deck. It's big, but on the student end, it feels like, oh, I'm playing this again. But I know as the teacher, they're getting different questions. And then once they've gotten all the questions, your report will tell you, oh, they've played all of the cards and this was their accuracy. So that'll come up on the report.
Thank you. So we have another question, and it is, how do you create your own clip art? Or can you mention that we receive a lot of this? Can you mention some of your favorite authors that create clip arts?
Okay. Making your own is crazy. I have an iPad and there's an app where I can draw it. It just doesn't look as good. I don't know why. My para, she thinks I'm amazing. Bless her little heart. So making your own is drawing it. I think if you're not really good at artists or you don't enjoy that part, and I guess that's the part of it, I don't enjoy the drawing the art. You probably need to get an illustrator to be able to do it well. Getting rid of the backgrounds, there's an app for that now. So I can do it. I don't enjoy it. It's not fast. So I buy most of my art. And if you go through my store, you'll be able to tell which things I drew and which things I bought. Favorite clip artists. I do, and some of my favorites don't draw the things I need. And I hate that. And I'll put, hey, are you ever going to make this? And they'll answer, oh, I'll put it on the list, but not now. So, there's that part too. My aesthetic of what I like, they don't always have what I need. I buy a lot of clip art from EduClips, Whimsy Clips, Creative Clips. So they're in there a lot. There's a new artist called Dieter Do Designs, And
Oh yeah.
he has some stuff that fits my middle school kids. So kind of depending on the age group of your kids, you'll be drawn to different artists as well. So those are some of my all-time favorites, but I know Elena V. I don't even sure how she said Heidsi's clip art. So there's a ton. Some of my decks, even on the preview, I'll have who the artists were, so you can look. But those are, and they're big names. They're very popular. And invest in good clip art. I know when I go back and look at decks I made 4 years ago, I'm kind of like, oh, that was so sad. I was trying to be so cheap. So now that I know Edgy Clips and Whimsy Clips are dependable, that they're quality, when they come out with one of those bundles, like buy it now and get more for free, I just buy it now.
Yeah, no, we gotta take those. Yeah, I love all of those authors too. I also create my clipboards, and yeah, it's on the iPad, but if you want to create like something like really quick, you can go and look for clipboards in our Boom store. You can also look for images there, so you can get some for free, or you can purchase with points. So we have another question here, and is, can you show us your behavioral examples? We received a couple of comments on this.
Behavior exam. Do you want to see the goal, or you want to see the boom decks again?
I believe I saw some comments on the chat of people like showing like examples of different behavioral decks.
Okay. Let me get one open before I answer that. So do we have another question while I'm going into my library? And I'll answer it while I'm searching around.
Yeah, I would love also to hear a little more about how you assess data and share IEPs with fellow teachers and parents. This is a good one.
Oh, so okay. How I assess the data. So if I make the card specific to the goal, assessing it is just, did they do it or didn't they do it? Like how many questions to ask or which questions to ask. To find that information, I go by my state standards and what the general ed teacher's assigning in the classroom. Before Boom Decks, a lot of times I would use just a teacher's worksheet as the way to measure, the thing, because if it's a grade level standard and she's teaching grade level standards and there's a worksheet on that grade level standard that's in the IEP, I'll just use that. And so the student work sample becomes it. What was the other part of that question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was how you share it with parents and
how I share with parents. Well, I share the goals with parents at the IEP meetings. The teachers, I share the IEP at a glance. This year I have a team that's new to the grade level. So we have a meeting set up next week where I can go through and help them read. There's 4 teachers and there's 5 students with IEP. So we're gonna look through all those 5 together so they can learn from each other. So, your student has anxiety and this. So, that's why he's going to get less work. Your student needs to build stamina and practice, so they're not going to get less work. And your student, so we're just going to talk about how all those accommodations, when accommodation doesn't fit all students, we have to look at what's the disability, what's the task we want them to do, and what's the roadblock. How are we going to work around the roadblock to get from finding out if they understand that task, or do we know he just doesn't write 10 answers on a paper, or do we know he doesn't know fractions? Like, which thing are you learning from this? So we'll do that. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again. I got into one of my decks that has a GIF on it. So the GIFs are the movable pieces. This one is a behavior reward because I'm pretty sure it is, because it's just for fun. So let's go. Oh, I guess I clicked on the last slide. Oh, shoot. All right. Well, while you watch, I will go to the self-publish. Let me find.
I was going to mention really quick about that, how to share in the IEP meetings. Another thing I did was sharing that average and like that data that you show from Boom, and you can actually share them like how fluent they are in that specific goal. And you have the data like from the first time they played, how the progress have been, and then the last time they play, like you can show them how the progress have been with
Yeah.
that.
So the parents, if they log in as the kid, I don't think they can see the report. The parents haven't asked to see the report. And that's the other thing. Not all my parents know that the progress monitoring score I send home came from Boom. And it isn't always just Boom. So it could be Boom Deck and me. So one day a week, they worked with me and we did it together. We did it on paper. We did it with manipulatives. And the other days they practiced alone. I don't tell the parents unless they ask. Because if you think back 10 years ago, did I tell the students, oh, we wrote on a whiteboard and did these math problems, or, oh, we wrote on a piece of paper and did these math problems. I never shared that. So I don't always just say, oh, well, based on their Boom learning performance, this is what I know. I don't really say that. All my parents know about Boom learning. It's in my teams. It's an assignment. So they know about it. I'm not hiding it. But just, if you wouldn't have said, oh, we did it on a whiteboard or we did it on a paper, why would you say, oh, we did it in Boom or we did it, with a manipulative? So I don't differentiate it that way. So here's another one of my behavior token boards where the kids could just move the space stuff to wherever they want. This is one my daughter asked for. She's a little boy, likes space. So that's a space one. There's another one that I have that's a token board. Oh, here's the spooky candy. It's not my favorite. So there's a candy shop and then there's spooky candy. So you can move the Halloween spooky candy stuff. It has another card. So there's always two slides that are similar. So if they like the thing, it's not the same exact thing. This one's like the pandas, tilts it there and the kitty will be there and I'll put the cookie jar on the table. And it's kind of interesting which kids like building the scenes. What's another token board one? That's the one thing I will ask Boom. We need to make it so I don't have to use that little toggle on the side. The toggle makes me crazy.
You can use the search bar and type the name of the
Oh,
day.
I don't remember what I called them. I have a Valentine one that's kind of cute. Was there another question while I look for just more behavior token boards?
Okay, let me see. So we have one that says, this may be a silly question. I am a virtual teacher who uses Adobe Connect. I have only used Boom cards a few times where the student points to the answer and the parents tell me which answer they are pointing to. Any suggestions on how to use Boom cards more effectively other than assigning and the students completing them without me?
Yeah, so make the Boom deck and then don't assign the Boom deck to the student, just share the Boom deck and have the student do it. I mean, it's like this activity, it could be a shape activity. I have it in as a token board for Valentine's, like earn a candy and fill the box. If you fill the box before the end of class, yay, right? But it could be shapes. But because it's an online form doesn't mean the student has to do it alone. So you could sit with them and do it. If they have a touch screen, they can drag and drop it. Maybe they're not wanting to drag and drop. Maybe they don't want to type. Again, just like anything, we have to adjust Boom to meet the student needs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for that one, I want to share my screen to share like an example that I had here.
Okay.
Because I saw the question before. Let me share it real quick. So this is an example of a social story, like asking for help for that, like life skills or behavioral decks. So you can have a social story, like we mentioned in the Q&A. You can put audio with instructions, and the students will be able to play the social story and then answer some questions. So here's like asking for help and then self-control. We have some really cute one from a lot of different authors. So you can use Boom in many ways. You just leave your creativity flow. And yeah, you can use Boom cards in many ways.
Mhm.
So well, thank you very much, Kimberly. Is there
All
anything
right.
else you want to say to the people?
No, if you haven't tried it, try it. And there are a lot of free decks out there. So, if you're not sure what Boom's about, go try some free decks. I know I have free decks. A lot of my token boards are free because my heart just breaks for those kids that are needing behavior intervention. Like, dude shouldn't have to struggle with that at school too. So, look for those free decks, try them out. If you see a free deck you like and you're like, oh, that would work for my student, just make one. Just make one. It's like, oh, okay, they typed in the answer. I can do that. And then pick clip art you like or something that matches your students and just try it out. I will say I do make all the backgrounds in PowerPoint first. So when I go to Boom, all I'm adding in are the typing boxes or the images that are going to change all the time.
Well, thank you very much. Right now, I'm going to be showing you really quick how you can all, if you need any help, there's a blue button that you can press and you'll be able to see different deck FAQs and articles with more information. Let's say you want to know more about assigning. If you click, you'll see many different articles where you can have more information. And also you can contact us here, help desk. So you go settings, help desk, and you'll be able to create a ticket where you can send us an email. And also you'll be able to call us if you go to the help desk.
And the Facebook groups, I know you guys have an official Boom Facebook, but there's other Boom Facebook groups that are really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. You can join us. We have like, I think 4 different Facebook groups. They are super amazing. Here you can find our phone number and here you can create that ticket if you go to the article. So that's how you can get help from us. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you very much, Kimberly
All right,
Jacobs.
thanks.
Amazing.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm going.
Oh, she said my daughter's lucky. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, you can call us at this number you've seen, or you can send us an email to help@boomlearning.com. You'll have the recording on our YouTube page, and you'll receive a follow-up email where you can see the recording also. Don't forget to stay tuned because we're going to be having a Creating Your Own Decks webinar on October. So stay tuned for that. And thank you very much. Please fill out that feedback survey. It is super important for us to learn from your feedback. So thank you very much. Thank you, Kimberly, again. And
All right.
good night.
Bye.
Bye.